Hello and welcome to your program, The Agenda. How is 2013 looking since we've seen weeks already in the year? How have you been so far? Well, there have been some pressing and developing issues emanating in the country Nigeria, and we'd like to look at them closely. All right, my name is Philip Ihaza, and once again, this is The Agenda. First of all, we'll focus on fiscal issues, as we know that everything revolves in and around fiscal issues in society. Well, and the topic today is inflation, excess liquidity, and Nigeria's economic stability in 2013. Of course, I'll not be doing that alone. I have two distinguished guests here in the studio to do the talk with me. And I have to my far left, he is, okay, I'll start with my close left, my immediate left, and he's Barr.Pius Oladimeji. Welcome, sir.
It's a pleasure.
Good to have you around. Mr. Barr.Pius Oladimeji is a legal practitioner, a banker, consultant, and economic analyst. You're welcome once again. And then now to my far left, I've actually followed this man for some time, his write-ups, his articles, his ideologies, and his agenda. So now he is on the agenda, and his name is Mr. Henry Boyo. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Philip.
Yes. And Mr. Henry Boyo is an economist, he's a social expert and a public policy analyst. In case you're very conversant with the Punch newspaper, I'm sure you have a familiarity with that name, Henry Boyo. He's always at the back page of the Punch. Beautiful articles you have there. Welcome, sir. All right, now the year 2012 was seen as one of the worst since the advent of Nigeria's Fourth Republic. And then this was due to some policies, some assaults of the federal government. It was a year the country witnessed high levels of corruption cases and lackluster economic growth. The challenges facing the country are still mounting, and the economy is weak because of unemployment, inflation, high lending rates, and an ever-shrinking productive sector. Now, despite these issues, analysts are optimistic about the prospects of the country and the economy in this year, 2013. Now, in this edition of the agenda, we'll analyze some of these prospects and at the same time prefer likely solutions in order to project Nigeria's economy in 2013. That's the background of the matter. All right, the topic once again, like I said, is inflation. We have excess liquidity and Nigeria's economic stability in 2013. Okay, first of all, before I start, I want to ask, because I finally have you on set with us on the agenda, I want to ask, what is your drive, with your write-ups? Mr. Barr.Pius, you're also conversant with his write-ups, back page of the Punch. Yes. What is your drive in those articles, very, very inspiring articles? What exactly do you have as your ideology? Maybe you could have the opportunity now to tell the world.
Thank you very much, Philip.
Yes.
The object of the articles, maybe I should say first of all that I am not normally a loud or publicity-seeking or, how would I say it, extrovert kind of person and all that. But about 12 years ago, I started getting worried about the economy. Before that, I paid very little attention to the economy. I was satisfied with doing my business, employing people, and well, living a normal life like everybody else. But it became clear that something was wrong when we started earning a lot of money from crude oil sales, when crude oil prices generally began to top $100 and above, when in the past we had been contending with $10, $20, $40, $50. And interestingly at that time, it also occurred to me, or it also became obvious, that instead of growing economically, and instead of our people enjoying the benefits of this increasing revenue, we were actually becoming poorer. So that was a wake-up call for me. This was about 12 years ago. And at that point, I thought, something is wrong here. This doesn't add up. And I decided to find out why things had gone awry. And my observation was very simple. It was clear that every month they were dividing hundreds of billions of naira. Meanwhile, it was clear that 80–90% of the money that was being shared between the three tiers of government was actually derived from crude oil sales. In other words, they were dollar-denominated revenue. So when every month you saw in the newspapers or you heard on radio or television that they had divided 300 or 400 billion, you wondered what happened to the dollars? Why are they only dividing naira? And for about 2-3 months consecutively, I noticed that this was the situation. And consequently, I said, it means somebody is changing the dollar revenue into naira in order to be able to divide it to the 3 tiers of government. Wow. And it became clear also that this was totally unconstitutional. Besides, it was also clear that this was the poison in our economy. This was the reason why we're getting poorer when we're getting richer. This was the reason why our debts were accumulating. This was the reason why interest rates were very high and beyond the real sector's access. And this was also the reason why inflation was always in double digits. Consequently, it became clear to me that something was wrong, and I paid more attention to that. And that, over the years, 12 years now, I have been making the advocacy to stop that nonsense and create an enabling environment. Because without an enabling environment, and by enabling environment, we mean interest rates at single digit, not more than 5% for the real sector. Agriculture, maybe even 0%.
0%.
Okay? And inflation also certainly minimally at not more than 2 or 3%. These were the indices I was looking for, and these are the indices I know will drive the economy. Besides, you couldn't have a situation where you are earning more dollars and your exchange rate of the naira was getting weaker. Exactly. That again was a contradiction. But it was clear to me that all these boiled down to the unconstitutional capture of the dollar earnings by the central bank and substitution with naira allocations. Until this monopoly is dismantled, I'm sorry, we wouldn't be able to get out of the woods and we'll continue to remain poor, even if we earned 10 times the amount of money we're earning at the moment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Henry. All right, just very quickly, I'll ask both of you, what do you think, based on the weak economic experience in Nigeria, where, from the scale of 1 to 10, where would you place us in 2012? How did we fare? Starting with you, Mr. Henry. 1 to 10, what's your scale? What do you think, how much do you think we fared in 2012, generally, in the economy?
Well, if you had to give a mark, it would be a mark of failure, obviously. So obviously, it's certainly below 5. Below 5. There's no doubt about that, because nothing has happened.
Mr. Pius?
I share the same feelings, and if you are making a judgment like this, you predicate your judgment on available statistics at our disposal. And you look at the failed nation index, for example, you will realize that Nigeria nosedive to the 4th position.
4th position.
Yes, okay. 4th position of the failed nation. Wow. Globally.
So is your scale on 4? It has to be on 4.
At around 3 or 4.
Okay. Well, you give us more reasons why, based on your indices, why you placed the country on a scale of 3 or 4 in 2012.
The issue there is that when you are talking about economic growth and the stability of a nation, you know, these things are predicated on certain variables that are testable and that are universally acceptable to people. We are talking of variables like, you know, the economic stability itself. We are talking about the social stability. Then we are talking about the security. You know, all these things are lacking within the nation. If you look at the year 2012 precisely, you will realize that we battled throughout the year with the issue of oil subsidy, even at the very beginning of the year. Not even minding, and subsequently throughout the year there was a security issue.
Even 2 weeks to the end of the year.
All those things does not give room for stable economic situation. And that's exactly what even the so-called rate of inflation that is being paraded by the government, that there was a slight reduction from 12.6 to 11.84, was nothing to write home about. If you go through the analysis, you will find out that it was due to the fact that the basket, with the food basket, you know, there was a slight improvement in the food basket because of the flood situation. The flood seemed to have subsumed. It's not that we found any lasting solution to it. It was just because maybe there was a retreat kind of, and that gave room for some of those foods that were eaten that the price went up during the year to go down slightly. So it was nothing. It was nothing to write to me about.
Wow.
By my own assessment.
Do you go with the same views with Mr. Pius, sir?
Well, excuse me, in terms of nothing to write home about, I certainly agree. I mean, the variables or indices that grow an economy relate to specifically interest rates and inflation. In every country where there has been growth of the economy, you will find that the interest rate level, in other words, the cost of funds to the real sector, because the real sector really is the true provider of wealth, not the government sector, the public sector, because at the end of the day, the amount of money available to the public sector is really minimal.
Yeah.
We're talking of 5 trillion naira, for example, in the 2013 budget, or barely 5 trillion naira in the 2013 budget. That is only about $30 billion or thereabouts, okay? Meanwhile, you require close to $100 billion for adequate power alone, and that may not even be enough. So consequently, it's clear that the real sector should be the driver, the galvanizer of the industry. 5 trillion naira budget, total expenditure that is, out of which maybe 1.7 trillion is capital expenditure. That's only $6 billion. So you can, so it's better to disabuse your mind that the real sector, that the government can finance our infrastructural requirements. It's also clear that no country in the world has ever grown tremendously with interest rates to the real sector at 20-something% and inflation also at over 12%. You know, if you have inflation at over 12% annually, what you will find is that anyone who is earning 100,000 naira, for example, per annum or whatever, would find that at the end of every year, he would need to be earning 110 or more to be able to maintain his standard of living. Okay. If it is impossible for him to get 110 instead of 100,000, the chances are he will be poorer. So if in the first year he's poorer by 10%, and second year he's poorer by, within a period of about 10 years, it means, and his income has only increased marginally, the chances are he will end up being a very, very poor man. And to that extent, you find that pension funds or anyone involved in consolidating pension funds for the future, you feel rather, you must feel some sympathy for them, because at the end of 10 years, the money that they thought they would fall back on as a nest egg almost vanishes because it buys little or nothing. That is the reason why inflation is a very critical component, why it should never exceed, you know, lower single-digit rates of inflation. But unfortunately, we don't have that here. We have inflation at over 12%. We have a cost of borrowing at 20-something%. You can't grow an economy in this manner. But sincerely, this is not the first year it has happened. This has almost become a habit or a tradition for us to have these high interest rates and high inflation level. Rates which are totally out of consonance with development, growth, or indeed creation of employment. Because if the industries are not able to access funds, and the industries also, entrepreneurs are not, how do I say it, motivated to want to expand their businesses because there is no demand, and there's no demand because the income of the people is diminishing on an annual basis as a result of inflation.
Yes.
It's a cul-de-sac. I mean, you know, you can only fall off the cliff if you continue in that manner, and that's exactly what has been happening over the years.
All right. In case you're just joining on, this is the agenda where we look at very, very pressing issues that border on politics, economy, and all of that. But today we're looking at the economy, fiscal issues, and of course you know that everything revolves around fiscal issues. And like I said, you're welcome once again. I have Mr. Henry Boyo on set with me and Barr.Pius Oladimeji. We're going to be dealing with this issue very carefully. All right. Although inflation rates stubbornly remained around the double digits, you know, throughout the year, the exchange rates stability and the increase in external reserves were an indication of effectiveness of the central bank's policies. Do you agree with that? Okay, you're already shaking your head, but let's allow Mr. Pius.
Like I said, most of these things is something that we have to base on statistics. I don't know where you got those statistics from. Because the information at our disposal now is that the reserve went down by $300 million. In
2012.
Yeah, 2012, yes.
What was
that?
The
tail end in December. So which means that it's nosediving, although frankly speaking, there seems to be a little bit of stability
compared
in the
to what we used to have.
But even nevertheless, there is nothing still to write home about. Because we are talking of an economy that is a monocultural economy. Anything that affects that result can easily be wired up within a short period of time. If you could recollect a couple of years ago, the result was well built up, you understand? And before, within the span of 6 months, there was a serious erosion. And that erosion now is going down gradually because, and it will even be worse off towards the year when politics, when the electionary something will take that will come into place. And you find out that even globally, there is nobody that can beat his chest and says that there will be stability in oil price. It is suicide. We amount to an economic suicide for anybody to believe that the rate at which oil is being sold in the market will remain unchanged. In fact, conservativeness, it would have been better for us to even make our assessment and our budget on a relatively small price. Now the House and the executive seems to be having a premonition that, the whole thing will continue to be on the high side. And I believe you me, if you look at the DMOs, at the statistics at the DMO's office, you realize that Nigeria is going and borrowing again.
Of course.
And when you borrow, even when you say you have a reserve, the first thing remains that when ships are down, we may trade in those reserves. So those reserves are even cosmetic reserves. And like Mr. Boyo rightly pointed out, one fact remains that when the economy is not growing, the indices of growth are not there. All other growth are just cosmetic, and it can collapse like a part of cards at any point in time. And that's the issue. So the reserve is that we have 44 point something, in the reserve now is nothing to write home about until there is stability in the economy, and that stability is still lacking, even as we are talking now.
So do you agree that to some extent there was an improvement in the stability of the external reserves in 2012 compared to what we used to have? First of all, before I ask the question, because I noticed you were nodding your head.
I was in disagreement with you on what you said was the stability of the exchange rate. Even though I have issues with the so-called reserves, but let me address the issue of the so-called stability in exchange rate. It's the stability you indicated is the kind of stability, or how would I say it, what they call the peace of the graveyard, or stability in a graveyard. In other words, it's not the best place to be, but, you can be sure things are stable. That kind of thing. Okay? Because, you see, you should not be having a stable currency when you are having increasing dollar revenue. That is not, it's not logical, okay? You shouldn't, your currency should not be threatened. It should not be under threat to depreciate at a time that you are earning much more than you are earning before. Simple common sense says that the more of something you have, the less you are willing to pay for it. Okay. So consequently, if you are earning more dollars, especially when prices are in the area of $100 and above, even though last year's budget was predicated on $75 or thereabouts, you will find that it becomes inexplicable if your exchange rate is under threat. Okay? So that was why I was, shaking my head and saying, no, it's the stability of the graveyard you're talking about. The Naira should have been strengthening rather than depreciating. Yeah. We should not be talking, for example, in 1996 or thereabouts, we had just $4 billion worth of reserves. And interestingly, the exchange rate was 80 Naira to a dollar, okay? And yet, at that time, politically, we were not acceptable in the world because of the, military dictatorship that existed, okay? Now, today we have, by the way, the $4 billion we had in 1996 was only supposed to last us for 4 months in post-cover, okay? Today, we are supposed to have 40-something billion. Indeed, at a time that we had 60 billion reserves, dollars in reserves, that was when Okonjo-Iweala gave away 12 billion or something like that, okay? Yeah. Interestingly, in spite of the affluence, the apparent affluence of having so much dollars that we could give away some of the money, you found that our exchange rate was in the region of about 100 and something Naira to a dollar. That is a contradiction, okay? You should not have a weaker Naira when you have a huge, it doesn't if anything, the exchange rate should have been less than 80 Naira to a dollar. In fact, it should be anything up to, for example, if we say 80 Naira was $4 billion or thereabouts, okay? Therefore, you would expect that when you have 40 billion, your exchange rate would be 1/10 of that. In other words, you'd be talking of about 8 Naira to a dollar or something like that. But the reason why it hasn't worked out that way is because of the spurious arrangement for deliberately emasculating the Naira and creating problems in the Nigerian economy. And the reason for that is that, as I've said before, the more of something you have, the less you're prepared to pay for it. And the reason for that is very simple. when the CBN collects the dollar revenue that we earn, it locks up the money, the dollars, and substitutes or prints or creates naira in replacement and shares the naira, so-called naira equivalent, to the 3 tiers of government. In other words, the system becomes awash with plenty naira. So you have so much surplus naira about the whole place. Okay. And this surplus naira, or huge volume of naira, or value of naira as the case may be, is pitched in the marketplace against fewer dollars which the central bank decides to sell according to its wisdom on a weekly basis. So you have more dollars, more naira chasing a smaller quantum of naira. Market demand economics, supply and demand. You'll find that, so the more dollars that you earn, the greater would be the naira that central bank would create, and therefore, consequently, the greater would be the quantum of naira in the system chasing limited dollars. So you are trapped within a framework that ensures that you would remain poorer if you earn more dollars. But the issue of the reserves is even probably more critical. I was at a gathering organized by the Save Nigeria group on Monday, and one of the CBN directors there confirmed that although we claim to have $43 billion as reserves, that the truth, of course, is that the only $13 billion out of that belong to Nigeria.
Wow.
That the balance $30 billion belong to the central bank. And somebody asked why. He said, for a very simple reason, the central bank has already given you the naira component. Therefore, you should not claim to have the 30 billion. And another person asked, but central bank and Nigeria, aren't they the same thing? I mean, how, as an accountant, for example, do you reconcile your books? That you have money, and somebody converts it into naira and gives it to you, and then you go back and buy the dollars from another third party. In the process of doing that, you now say that the dollars now belong to you, and you can. And of course, that explains to a very large extent the source from which CBN funds all these interventions and donation to one university, 100 million to one.
We don't want to go there.
You know, and all that. But you have to, because this is reality. This is reality. So you find that it is from this source that they obtain this kind of money. But the reality, of course, is that how can central bank claim that they have $30 billion which belong to them and not the country, and claim that they use that money for modulating the economy? What modulation do we know that they do with $30 billion, apart from having the money to spread out and spend? Now they have created what they call some enterprise creation center. I don't know what role they have to.
Okay, I have one rule. I have one rule here that I might want to read out. That was really timely. I have one rule here that I might want to just read out as it is. Maybe you can contribute to. It says the central bank governor, Malam Sanusi Lamido, has cited economic uncertainties, weak recovery in advanced economies, concerns about inflationary pressure, crude oil and commodity prices in international markets, and then fears of fiscal spending as some of the factors that influenced the liquidity management during the year. Do you think the CBN has done enough to manage this vital aspect of the economy, talking about liquidity? I know you're a member of the CIBN, the Chartered Institute of Bankers Nigeria.
The CBN will claim that their policy has ensured the stability. But the fact still remains that all these variables that he mentioned himself, I mean, they are dialectical issues, you understand. Until those issues are fully addressed, there can't be the real stability. Because even now that things seems to be relatively stable, according to him. If there is any slight distortion, like I rightly mentioned the other time, if there is any slight distortion, maybe by way a lower demand of our crude oil, then we'll be in crisis. Now he's talking, there are some of the interventions he actually made, which had already created a lot of problems. You realize that in among the airlines, there was a time they gave them a lot of money.
Funds.
Some of these funds, in most cases, because they are not properly packaged, some of these sectors see it as more or less as a windfall. And when they use it, some of them, because of the infrastructural inadequacies within the country, there are a lot of challenges they are facing within this country, which is making their business almost unviable. So getting the money, they will just continue to be in business without necessarily having any margin, no profit margin to go home with. So at the end of the day, repayment becomes suspect. They cannot pay back what is being taken. And now he's talking of that he's going to intervene again in the power sector and everything. Such intervention is not what CBN should be doing directly, because you are taking away the power, of the technocrats, of the experts in the financial service industry, who will look into a lot of things, a lot of factors before advancing such loans. But when you just tell a sector, oh, money for textile is with the boy, just go there, they will pack paper and everything, and before you realize it, they will release it because they want that sector to move. But even when the sector is moving, there are various challenges still remain with them. And at the end of the day, paying back those money becomes very, very suspect and difficult.
Okay, we have to take a break now, especially at this point where the matter seems to be taking a new turn. All right, we'll take a break, and when we come back, the agenda continues. Stay tuned.
In the bid to stabilizing the Nigerian economy in 2013 and the future, a lot of questions have been raised following the escalating inflation rate, high interest rates, the poor foreign exchange earnings, and the presupposed failure of the government's effort to induce growth in the country. A roundtable dialogue organized by the Save Nigeria Group at the first anniversary of the 2012 Nigeria Street protest against the culture of corruption was held recently in Lagos, Nigeria, where stakeholders, members of the Nigerian press, and economists gathered to deliberate on the monetary policy framework that underlies the setback in the Nigerian economy and the way out.
And you see, when we talk about rates, we should not forget the fact that Nigeria is not just an island. And I want to say something about real positive interest rate, which is very, very critical in terms of looking at rates. Because you could have a rate that is very low while inflation is high and your rate becomes negative, and you know it's detrimental. So it is the whole essence of balancing this, which is why I'm still coming back to the issue of where we have to maintain a level of flow of liquidity in the system that is consistent, because it will be very imperious.
Boyo has a correct analysis of our economic problem. If they can't even take him into governance, can't they even listen to him and apply what of those things the man have been writing about? I've been talking about. You listen to him clearly. He spoke in a very simple English of why we're having problem in our economic policies. How can you be earning money in dollars and you are giving naira, and you use the same naira to chase dollars, and you borrow at 12% and you're not doing anything with the money? Now they tell you that they have made provision for farmers. How many farmers have access to those credits, those money that has been dedicated for farmers? Nobody has access to it. It's all about politics. So there is a problem with economic policies, and the people who are running our economy, they are not brainy enough to run economic policy that will make Nigeria to be very efficient.
Observers and economists have argued that the present monetary policy is bringing down the economy.
What everybody is saying is that we are bounded by the Constitution. When the central bank wants to do something good, the Attorney General says, no, it's not in the Constitution. Don't do something good. It's a question of leadership. But the Constitution can only draw up the kind of leadership.
Okay, that was the highlight of the meeting you were just talking about. I hope you enjoyed that brief segment there where we had to catch our breath. We're still talking about fiscal issues and finding a way to project and position Nigeria's economy in 2013 in a better platform. I'd like you to comment briefly, because Mr. Henry was right there at the event, so I'd like you to give your own views before he comes in about that speech, the various speeches. Yes, the various speeches made by
I
them.
would personally say that I joined in no band when, for the very first time, I'm seeing that kind of an advocacy, something coming up in this country. Because one of the greatest problems we have in this country is lack of understanding, thorough understanding of the economic situation. So that some people just believe that when you are a critic of the government, you are just the enemy of the government. Whereas in advanced country, what happened is that through this advocacy, through this commentary and everything, government change their policy. We know that for now we are having a kind of a government that is incorrigible. But my own belief is that when we keep on drumming those advocacy all over the place, in the academia, in social forum like that, people will get a better understanding. Like a lot of us, even those people who are even in the financial circle, until I started reading Mr. Boyo's comment on this dollar something, you know, it never occurred to me even as a banker that they were even trading, because what the CBN, yes,
trading,
yes, it was trading, because they were trading. The so-called money that they were able to reserve and they were calling their own was just the margin they were making through the through the process of that selling of dollars. That's what is happening. And moreover, this thing is very, very good, because now the CB, all the parties, all the stakeholders are in this forum. That is another thing that is noteworthy about this program, because now it's not a question of just saying, oh, we are making just talking without the regulators being there. They were well represented. You know, the politicians are also there. Yeah. You know, those people in the other side, even in the academia, I think with the representation I saw there, it was a well-balanced representation, which means that they can come out and defend what they are doing. And I think we should be able to sustain this kind of an arrangement, and the nation will be better for it. Yes.
Mr. Boyo, let's look at the liquidity and cash flow situation last year. It was a major challenge for many investors, because we're taking some cue from last year in order to prefer solutions for 2013. Now, a lot of stakeholders have asked that lending rates should be moderated and access to credit should be reasonably liberalized. What do you think about this? Do you think this can be implemented as demanded by the popular, everyone, every citizen?
There's no magic about interest rates and liquidity, or indeed of, industrially supportive interest rate level and inflation. For a very simple reason. Just as some of the central bank officers at that gathering said, they blamed their inability to bring down interest rates to that of market demand and supply. In other words, what they said was that there is more demand for credit than there is available credit. Of course, this is false, because it couldn't be so if you have excess liquidity also existing side by side, and you, central bank, you are mopping it up and you are saying that the demand for credit is too much. So already that's a no argument. But the reality, of course, is that you cannot get low interest rates and you cannot get low level of inflation so long as you continue, as we have done in the past 20 to 25 years or more, to have a cash surplus or cash surfeit or excess liquidity plagued economy. They're all the same thing, okay? And you cannot, in other words, what I'm saying is that excess liquidity is the instigator and the primary cause of high interest rates, okay. Because there is so much money and the central bank wants to take the money out. In the process, they have to pay the banks an interest rate that is high enough to make them turn their eyes away from the real sector and face the government. At the same time, inflation is an indication that there's so much money chasing too few goods. So the common denominator on both things is excess liquidity or too much cash. The question is, what causes the excess liquidity or what brings about the excess liquidity? The central bank would want you to believe that the excess liquidity is the result of expansionary fiscal policies. What they mean is that government is spending too much. But however, when you go to successful economies elsewhere, when they want to instigate their economy or grow their economy, they ensure that government has enough money to spend, or indeed that the people have more money to spend, either as a result of tax rebates or something like that, to create what? Demand, to give them money to buy. Because when you create demand, you also instigate the motivation of entrepreneurs who now see that, many people are buying bread than before and the bakeries cannot cook. Let me also get, it's the same thing all over. Yeah. So long as you have excess liquidity as a problem, you cannot get a low level of interest rate or a level of interest rate that is conducive. Okay? So what you would have is continuously high interest rate. That is why the government or the monetary experts in the country, the government's monetary experts, are afraid of increasing crude oil revenue, because they know that increasing crude oil revenue means that bigger allocations of dollars, and that would be translated into a higher excess liquidity when converted into naira. So it's a no-win situation for them. We have to pray that, God, please don't bring us more crude oil prices, otherwise we're in trouble. And if you take that argument to its logical conclusion, then you would find that it probably would be better if we don't earn any dollar income at all. And that's not good enough, because what would happen is that the little we earn government will say, we don't have enough dollars, so let us, how would I say it? Increase the supply of naira in the market. In other words, depreciate the naira so that we can have enough money to keep spending and jollificating as we have done in the past. Exactly. So either way, it's a no-win situation, whereas it does not have to be so. The cost of excess liquidity, the cost of inflation, the cost of high interest rate, the cost of even a depreciating naira is too much naira again chasing too little dollars. So the antidote of all this must be anything that can stop excess liquidity
in the
and
market.
The only thing that you can do to stop excess liquidity for now
is to increase the oil revenue,
to pay the dollar-denominated revenue with the instrument of dollar certificates. In other words, allow the members of the 3 tiers of government to own domiciliary accounts. If you allowed an individual citizen, poor me, to have a domiciliary account, a state and local government are bigger entities than me. So you can't prevent them from having domiciliary account into which they must pay, or they could pay, their dollar earnings. And when they pay their dollar earnings into that, one thing you have is that excess liquidity will vanish, will disappear, because nobody is capturing the dollars and say, I own $30 billion when you don't, and yet pouring so much naira in your hands. You know, consequently, what you would have is a situation where there appears to be much more dollar certificates in the market, or dollar values, chasing little naira. 2 things or 3 things will immediately happen as a result of that. First, because there's no excess liquidity, there's no need to mop up. If there's no need to mop up, then, of course, the banks don't have that ready customer who is prepared to bring money today and come back and borrow it tomorrow. Exactly. Consequently, they will concentrate and go and search and look for the real sector to lend money to, because the essence of banking is to make money. So if there's nobody to make money from, you are not a banker.
Wow. Very, very, no wonder you are always, I'm looking for a right word. Consistency is even not yet the word I'm looking for, but you are so consistent on your ideologies on reforming this economy, and wish is that the right ears listen and pay attention to ensure that we are positioned rightly. But talking about rebounding the economy, because that's the reason we're here, President Goodluck Jonathan has been urged by stakeholders to, like you and I, to urgently address the epileptic power supply. Okay, he has given us a brilliant one about the liquidity problem. Let's look at the epileptic power supply problem, and then the stakeholders have also urged the president to implement the oil and gas sector reform agenda. For example, the PIB bill that has been in the Senate for some time. All of this, what do you think? What's your take on this about rebounding the economy?
Yes, frankly speaking, the issue of power is very central because even despite the fact we are talking of increase in interest rates, one of the greatest constraints for the real sector today is the issue of power.
Because even if they do not borrow, somehow they can thrive in an enabling economy.
And even for the small scale, for the entrepreneurs, in fact, their business is almost wiped away because of lack of power. So power is very central. But the problem there is that let's look at the ways in which this government is going about getting the power. Yeah, you understand? Because these are issues. When we are a nation that is not, we are not living in isolation. We see what is happening in this era of globalization. We have seen this thing happening in other nations across the globe.
We even have to rob money.
If you look at the amount, the quantum of money that had already been spent on power sector in this country, you will know that by now, you and I, power ought to be a thing of the past. But that is not the case. If you look at the reforms has always been endless. And I can bet you with you that this reform is likely not to end even during this tenure. It's likely to continue. Which means that governments does not have even the political will to even come with policies that will be able to take a stand. They don't have the political will to be able to ask questions. The previous amount spent on this power sector there were a lot of pros in a natural sense, but have you seen the light at the end of the day? All those pros just died there. So the thing is moribund there. So the challenge is there. Corruption is killing. It's one thing for government to say that, oh, I want power to be all over the place. Even one of the things that determines the relation foreign investors in dealing with us is the sincerity of purpose. But what do we have in government? What we have today is artificiality of governance. You know, we have government. You understand? Government is listening. Government will do this. Government will talk to people. But at the end of the day, these issues are not being tackled. They are not being solved. Corruption is killing this nation today. Corruption is not making, the power to work. The PIB you have mentioned, how many times has it been sent to the National Assembly? And the thing keep on going back, amendments here and there. Everybody, you see people are very egocentric. They are talking about themselves, not the nation. You understand? The reason why people are talking of no derivation, no this, is because they've not been able to see the impact of development, even the one being given to them. Is there any impact? And it borders more on that. This government we are talking about, in as much as this issue is not political, is that we are talking of a government that has been in governance for 13 years. And we have been battling with this power. And we have been battling with the issue of fuel. We don't have fuel today. We don't have power today. You wonder whether whether that political party can solve that problem.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pius.
Very unfortunate.
Well, don't forget that this is the agenda and you can be a part of it. Just saying that, I'm actually seeing two comments here. I don't know if I have enough time to take a look at it. One is from Mr. Peter from Port Harcourt. He says, Americans put America first before self. Nigerians must think first of Nigeria and stop this ever-increasing appetite for greed and self-enrichment. That should be the new agenda. Okay, that's coming from Peter. Thank you so much. And then I have a very voluminous epistle here. It looks poetic also, from Kelechi Okoro, Port Harcourt also. And I'll try to take the much I can. It says, my thoughts are the same as always. My teenagers see the fulfillment of their dreams as emigration from this country. I believe this is simply because no patriotism is bred into them. The school curricula teach religious fiction as Nigeria's history and brazenly ignore milestones in our history. Our anthem says that the labors of our heroes past shall never be in vain, but how can we achieve this if we are not informed of those labors or educated about them? Okay, I'll try to just go to the end part of this. It says, okay, governors such as Governor Rotimi Amechi have done excellently well in building schools and providing free education, but the Ministry of Education should seriously revisit our curricula and tailor it to breed strong patriotism in our children. For if this is not done, we will never be rid of elected officials who lack any form of patriotism and national pride. Beautifully written there. Thank you so much, Mr. Kelechi Okoro from Port Harcourt. That was a very nice epistle there. I'm sure you might have to get this man's attention and maybe include him in your articles. Thank you so much. You can also send your comments, don't forget, to agenda@LoveworldPlusNews.net. All right, just briefly, because we're almost out of time here, I wanted to leave a last word on, okay, one very good one. We've seen Greece, we've seen Spain, a lot of those European countries in sort of a debt trap, from borrowing, incessant borrowings. What do you think we can actually do to prevent that state, prevent us from getting into that, well, I call it a cliff?
Well, the reality, of course, as we have been made to understand by the government, is that we owe 6.6 trillion naira on the domestic front, and maybe a little bit, much less, I think about $6 billion or thereabouts on the external front. But having said so, these amounts obviously do not include the money that AMCOM borrowed, or we've borrowed on behalf of Nigeria. I think about 3 trillion or so thereabout. That is part of our national debt. And whether we like it or not, we would have to pay for it. And the interest rate on most of these loans are usually in excess of 10%, in other words, higher middle level single digit or something, double digit, so to speak. So consequently, you find that we have our government borrowing money at excessively high rates, with indeed risk-free sovereign debts of that nature, especially for a country that is not in dire distress like Spain or Italy, should not normally be above 3 or 4%. Consequently, we are borrowing at 12%. So in other words, most of those debts are at over 12%. So if you have 6 trillion naira, and we are paying almost 600 billion naira as service charges, and you haven't made a provision for liquidating those debts, because the 600 billion is just service charges. And you have 6 trillion plus AMCON's 3 trillion, and possibly other small debts around the corner.
So what do you think?
You will find that it will take you 70 years or thereabouts to pay the debts, especially since you have only started having a sinking fund of 100 billion naira every year in order to pay these debts. So you are in big trouble, and the chances that you can ever develop when you have a huge debt ratio of that magnitude, plus also you factor into that the fact that you are also spending close to 2 point something trillion on fuel subsidy.
This matter is a really huge one.
Yeah, you find that at the end of the day, you are spending close to 3 trillion naira out of 5 trillion naira that you have budgeted for expenditure in a year.
Mr. Henry, I've just been told that we're running really out of time. You have a lot of advocacies for change, and I'm wondering, we need to give you another avenue for your voice to be heard. But you've not still given, what do you think, categorically, maybe in one sentence, what do you think we can do immediately to stop this debt trap from us?
Stop
Nigeria from getting into, CBN,
rightly put it. No, but it's true. I mean, that's the source.
That's it.
Stop CBN from carrying on with its monopoly of the foreign exchange market. And let CBN offer dollar certificates to the 3 tiers of government for dollar-derived revenue. Immediately you do that, within 6 months. The man there who was saying that the dream of his children is to go over there, in 2 years' time, all these people will be coming back here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Henry. Mr. Pius, very quickly, also in one sentence, how do you think we can encourage patronage of our goods in Nigeria? It's still a
maybe I want to link it with the patriotism we are talking about. Patriotism is not a strange thing in this country. When I was growing up as a young kid, we were very patriotic of this nation. So at that time, we have a very bright future. I was seeing myself being a graduate.
What about this year,
employment,
2013?
but now we have 3 levels of unemployed in most families around. We have insecurity. At that time, I can go to Maiduguri, I can go over.
We're really out of time.
We are saying that the government should make sure that there is sanity, in this nation. When there is sanity in this nation, when there is good governance at the micro level and at the macro level, then Nigeria patriotism will fall in place.
Thank you so much. On behalf of my producer, I'd like to say a very big thank you. Mr. Henry Boyo, the economist and veteran writer in most newspapers, and then Mr. Barr.Pius. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll have to do this again and give us a voice. I hope you join us same time next week when we come back with another pressing issue or peradventure this same issue. My name is Philip Ihaza, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye for now.